Hello and welcome to episode 40. We've made it 40 episodes already, plus a handful of other fun things. I'm your host, Jack Gardner, and with me today are Daniel Jones and Jeremy Brown. And today we are going to be talking about pretty much one of the most universally praised games of all time, Ocarina of Time. Before we get into that, though, how are you fellas doing on our 40th episode?
Feeling good for 40.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Feeling vigorous and virile and verdant?
I don't feel over 39 at all.
Virulent?
Vivacious. I feel vivacious.
So,
Ocarina of Time.
the big one. It's such a monolith. Like, how do you even begin talking about it? Genuine question. How do we do this show? I forgot.
Well, it released on the Nintendo 64 in November of 1998.
True. It did. And then it became the greatest game of all time.
When did
According
you
to
guys
many
play
people,
it?
yes.
When did you guys play it? When it came out on N64?
That's a good question. I probably didn't play it until 99 or maybe early 2000.
Okay, well, that's not too bad.
No.
I mean,
I played a tiny bit of it generally when it came out. I don't know exactly when.
yeah.
But I actually played the game completely on the 3DS. That was my first actual real experience with it.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, so because there's differences between that version and the original version.
Yeah, it includes like the master quests.
Not just that. Didn't they improve like some of the dungeon designs, specifically like the water temple?
That's what the master quests did. Which you could get that version 10, 15 years before it came out on the 3DS.
No, I'm pretty sure they did more with the newer version, but
I don't know. I never played the old one, so I can't really say. I just remember looking back at it when it came out and asking that question. That's kind of the general thing I was told.
So Master Quest is interesting. Actually, it's super interesting if you look at it, because it was originally designed for the N64 disk drive.
Yeah, the add-on.
Yeah.
And it ended up getting scrapped just because the add-on ended up being such a failure. It sold 15,000 units, and they made 85,000 units more that just never went anywhere.
Phew.
Was never released in the United States. It was only Japan. So they were going to make Master Quest and kind of release it as an additional thing, and instead what ended up happening was they were like, hey, this code is actually similar enough that we could port it over to the GameCube with relatively little effort. And so it came packaged for the GameCube with the original Ocarina of Time as well.
Right.
So, and I'm not sure, but I believe that was might have been a promotional thing that they used to sell the Wind Waker.
Yeah. It came out around the same time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wasn't it like pre-order the Wind Waker or something?
It
was
might have
like
been a pre-order bonus.
collector's bonus or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was like a limited edition run of Wind Waker came with that.
Wait, so not every version of the GameCube Ocarina had the Master Quest? I think it did.
No, I think it did.
I think it did. I think you're right. It's just they initially offered it as a pre-order bonus.
Oh, okay.
Right.
Gotcha.
And it came. They came together. So when you pre-ordered Wind Waker, you got the Wind Waker disc, and you also got the disc that had both Master Quest and the original on it.
Yeah.
So, yeah, the 3DS version, I don't know what all of Master Quest is, but it takes the dungeon elements from Master Quest and it adds them right into the game.
Okay. Yeah, because Master Quest was kind of a remix of... Not a remix, but they reworked the dungeons and stuff from the original. It was kind of a new game plus, almost.
Okay.
And I think in general people liked Master Quest a little bit better because it was also a little bit harder.
Yeah, it was harder.
Yeah, just a really interesting... I hadn't ever looked until I did some research for this show, I hadn't ever really looked at the N64 double D, DD. I don't know how you're supposed to even talk about it.
Disk drive. You just say disk drive.
Disk drive.
Disk drive.
Okay. It's a fascinating piece of technology. It would have let the N64 connect to the internet. It had like a built-in clock, so they could have. They had initially planned a lot of the games that came to the GameCube for the disk drive, like Animal Crossing was supposed to be on the N64. Obviously ended up on the GameCube, but like it was supposed to be kind of even like what the Wii U ended up being. You were supposed to be able to buy Mario Paint games and be able to like draw and create things with a mouse in Mario Paint and then share them online with other people and send messages and stuff, which never really happened. And yeah, a lot of cool thing. I think we might have missed out on some cool things because the disk drive never caught on.
Yeah, probably. So I'm researching the Ocarina of Time 3D for the 3DS one,
mm-hmm.
and yeah, that version specifically fixed the water temple. So that makes it a much better version of Ocarina of Time than the original. Because the water temple, on multiple occasions, the water temple stopped me from playing that game any further. So it says here on ZeldaUniverse.net, to aid players in changing the water level inside the temple, some of the walls and doors inside the temple now have thick colored lines around them, coming in red, blue, and green. The image below, you can't see the image, but the image below shows an example, a door outlined in red to guide players to a room where the water level can be changed. Each water level is allocated one of 3 colors, giving players an easier time in navigating the temple. So you may have noticed something else interesting in that image. Another common complaint to hear in the water temple is how often players have to pause the game and go to the equipment screen to switch between the Kokiri boots. This is another thing. The Kokiri boots and the iron boots. The image shows that the iron boots have been switched to an item that can be put on or removed with a single touch, just like how the iron boots functioned in The Legend of Zelda Wind Waker. So those 2 things were not in the original.
I remember the iron boots thing now that you mention it. I remember that.
Yeah.
Having heard that was different, yeah. But yeah, the water temple wasn't so bad, so it must have been a lot different.
You know, maybe it's because I played it when I was a kid with a lot of free time. I don't remember the water temple being as bad as everyone made it out to be.
It was the worst.
And again, maybe it's because I had that early experience, but even when I go back and play it on like non-Master Quest on the original N64, it's like I still don't find it that bad, but again, maybe that's because I am used to it, you know?
Maybe.
I gotta just explain my history with the game.
Right.
Just to explain why I hate the water temple so much. I don't know if I'm just dumb and not very good at like navigating Zelda dungeons or whatever, but the water temple always stops me in my tracks whenever I play that game. I haven't played the 3DS version. I think I would love it because I could actually get past it. So I personally have never played past the water temple.
So you've never finished the game?
I played it in high school with my best friend. High school. It was 98. So, no, I mean, we were freshmen in high school. So, I played it with him, and we switched off, and he finished, and I watched him play the rest of the game. I've played the game, so I played it, I played up to that point with him, he finished it. We finally, together, figured out the water temple. And then it was just like, you know, never looking back. And at that point, it was his copy of the game anyway. So I might have missed some of the last couple hours, but he finished it. So then I went back to it when I had a GameCube, and I played that version, and got to the water temple, and just put it down. And I picked up Resident Evil 4 or Metroid Prime or something instead. And then I got another N64 a few years ago, and I played it again, and I got to the water temple and decided I'm an adult with better things to do than run around this goddamn temple looking for the right fucking door to get through.
Well, I mean, at that point, you probably could have YouTubed it.
I don't like to do that.
No, me neither.
Something about like retro games, I like to play them as though I was playing them in the past without the benefit of YouTube.
Yeah, it's always nice to have that link to the past.
Well, I guess we haven't really explained what Ocarina of Time is.
Yeah, we should talk more about the game in general. I just wanted to give that basis of my opinion on it.
I'll take a crack at the story.
All right, sounds like a great plan.
Good luck with that.
I think it's pretty simple overall. There are complicated specifics, but in general terms, you play as Link, or insert name here, whatever.
Wait, I thought the hero's name was Zelda.
And you're a kid who lives in kind of this elf village in the Kokiri forest, and one day you wake up and you have a fairy, and all the other Kokiri have had fairies, and this is the first time you've gotten one, and you're summoned to go to see the Great Deku Tree, who's kind of the guardian spirit of the forest. You go there, and you find out, oh, there's great evil in the land of Hyrule, and you need to go talk to the princess of Hyrule. So then you kind of go off on this epic quest after you lift the curse on the Great Deku Tree, only to find out he's dead anyway.
Yeah.
You take off on this quest, and over the course of the quest, you're still this kid. But after you collect a series of magic stones, you are sealed within the Temple of Time with the help of Princess Zelda in order to essentially get... I was always vague on why this helped or how this came about, but you're sealed into this time temple to train to become a hero or something, and 7 years pass, and you gain the ability to both go forward in time and backwards in time, to be an adult and also then go back to when you're a kid in order to kind of do different things. So it kind of has that split world aspect that A Link to the Past had. Except instead of dark world and light world, it's future and past. Once you hit the point where you can become an adult, then the quest becomes you need to find the 7 sages that represent different elements of the universe or whatever. And you need to get them together because Ganon has the Triforce of Power and has kidnapped Zelda, who has the Triforce of Wisdom, and Link has the Triforce of Courage. And in order to prevent Ganondorf from having ultimate power, you need to stop him. And the only way to do that is to get these sages together. So that's what you gotta do. And in broad terms, that's it. Of course, as you go through your journey, you encounter a whole cast of characters, like the Princess of the Zoras, who are these kind of fish people, and the tribal chief of the Gorons, who are these rock-eating... I don't even know what you would describe them as. Creatures. They like to roll around.
Rock-eating creatures, yeah.
But they're like... There's not really a parallel. Like, you can call Zoras kind of like fish people, because they're kind of fishy spirit elves or something. I'm not really sure how you, like, what's the equivalent in mythology of a Goron?
Wait
rock
a second.
People.
They're rock people.
Wait a second.
What?
Gorons are the big round ones that roll around, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. I thought you were talking... Yeah. That's what I thought you were talking about, and then for a second I thought you were talking about the blue people.
No, those are the fish people.
No, those are the Zoras. Princess
Zoras. Okay, sorry.
Yeah.
And Darunia is the leader of the
right.
Gorons.
Right. And my favorite, you also meet the Gerudos, who are this essentially matriarchal society composed entirely of awesome women who I think they're all supposed to be thieves. They live out in the desert.
Yeah.
But they're pretty awesome. They like fighting and stuff.
Yeah, their leader's kind of a jerk.
Yeah, but I mean, she's all right.
No, isn't their leader Ganondorf?
Well, I mean, he kind of usurped the power. It wasn't supposed to be that way.
Yeah, that's what I meant.
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of just this epic quest to save the world. And I think it's one of the first 3D games that really got across a feeling of epic scope and the idea that there's this world out there that actually needs to be saved, as opposed to kind of like just 3D arenas, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's one of the pioneering games to kind of introduce open worlds to 3D space as well.
Yeah, just in general, it's a very unclaustrophobic game, except for the water temple. But for the most part, like at that time, there were so many games that even fully 3D games were just incredibly claustrophobic. Whether they had the walls put in very close in the levels, they would design them narrow so that the draw distance wasn't as much of an issue. Or things like Turok Dinosaur Hunter, which we've covered on the show. Go back and listen to my honorable mention if you're interested. And that game had wide expanses of land, but you couldn't see them because there was just a massive wall of fog in front of you at all times. So for the most part, games were very claustrophobic. And Ocarina of Time, the first time you go out to that
Hyrule Field
is a revelation. It was at the time, you know.
Well, even in 2011, when did it come out on the 3DS?
Around then.
Around then. It felt, and after having played many open world games by this point, it still felt open and hadn't missed a beat. So I can't say I know exactly what you're saying doing it at the time, but I think I get it.
And it's interesting because when it came out, it received some criticism actually for how it ran technically. It was criticized for a lower frame rate than something like, I think a lot of people compared it at the time to Banjo-Kazooie, which came out earlier in 98. Because it had a lower frame rate and there were some technical issues related to that draw distance and how it performed with those wide open spaces. And I think it's worth mentioning that it was, like Master Quest, it was intended for the 64 double drive. DD. I keep calling it double drive? Disk drive.
Disk drive. Because you want to say double D.
I do.
But you don't want to say double D.
I don't think that's how they intended it to be said. But anyway, let's not linger on that.
I think it was just DD, wasn't it?
Yeah, DD. But it was intended for a more advanced system that held more data and would allow faster processing, and it ended up being put on a cartridge, which kind of limited its technical abilities.
That game's development changed a lot, actually, over the years.
Yeah.
Like, tremendous amount.
It wound up being the largest game that Nintendo had released to date.
Mm-hmm.
And wrap your head around this. It was the largest game they had released to date, and it was 32 megabytes.
Yeah.
That's insane.
That's crazy.
That is insane. Like, you can fit that on a free flash drive. And then you could also fit, like, a movie on there. That's crazy. You could, in like a 1 gigabyte flash drive, you could fit like 30 Ocarina of Times on it.
Yeah.
That's insane.
From a programming perspective, that must be incredibly compact. I'm kind of blown away by that fact.
Yeah.
As I was playing it, I played it to kind of prepare for the podcast.
Yep.
One of the things I was really marveling at was the animations. They're very smooth, which I don't think is something that people typically associate with early 3D games. I think people typically imagine them to be very clunky. And I don't find Ocarina of Time to be clunky. I find it very smooth, even though it's kind of pre-camera control. Like, it basically pioneered camera control.
It pioneered Z-targeting.
Yeah.
For sure. I know what you mean, yeah. Like
a lot
of
animations
those...
are smooth and clear. There's not choppy, and I don't really remember a lot of frame rate dropping even in the action animations.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But again, I played it on the 3DS, so they may have improved some of those things by that point.
But
I don't know.
even on the N64, like Nintendo was very good at making their N64 games.
I will
smooth.
also say that I played it on the Wii off the Virtual Console, and from what I understand, that's just a direct port from the N64.
Yeah.
So I didn't play it all the way through on there, but I did play it, and I didn't have any issues with any of that stuff.
I think it's also really interesting that the cutscenes are in-game. Like, it's in the game engine. At the time, it was more in vogue to have pre-rendered cutscenes.
Yeah. That the first scene where you see Ganon is pretty awesome.
Like the first scene at the very, very beginning when you're dreaming, or the one where he's pledging fealty to the king?
That one.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, that just gives you that imminent sense of this guy is going to be a pain in my ass the rest of this game.
Yeah, it gives you chills. And it's just... They really... This is my question for you, Jack, but like, to me, they really do a pretty great job of telling a story without characters talking and without your main character, the protagonist, talking. So I wanted to ask you, Jack.
Do you mean without voice acting?
Well, yeah, without voice acting. That's what I mean. And without Link having any lines. So technically, Link is a silent protagonist.
He technically is, yeah.
How do you feel about that, Jack?
You know, in general, I'm not a huge fan of silent protagonists.
You don't say.
But
Never would have guessed that.
I'd argue that in Ocarina of Time, at least, he might be silent, but he is a character. Like, he has a world of his own that we are following him along with. The player is not supposed to be Link. We're supposed to identify with Link, but the player is not Link. And I say that because there are little things like when you're around his treehouse, you see like pictures he's drawn on the house.
Yeah.
It's like a knight fighting a dinosaur monster thing. And you are supposed to understand that he has his own will. He's his own person. There's the idea that you don't fit in the Kokiri forest because you're not a Kokiri. You're a human being, or you're a Hyrulean. I guess that there aren't technically humans in the Zelda universe. They're all something else. So I'm not conflicted about it. It's not, to me, it's not something like my go-to is Half-Life, but there are tons of other silent protagonists that I feel are just empty vessels and aren't necessarily characters.
Also, from my experience with Ocarina of Time and Link in general, like the way that you can feel and sense a lot of his emotion just through, even on, the 64, through his emotions, through the animations, I guess they do with his face, with that limited technology, and the music also, and the little sounds. He does make some sounds.
That's true.
He's not completely silent.
You see how he acts in cutscenes too. Like, there's a really touching moment at the beginning of the game when he's leaving the forest for the first time, and his friend/mother figure Saria is giving him an ocarina and just kind of saying goodbye. And
she a mother figure?
I think she is. I
always thought she was kind of a love interest.
I think
me too.
I think it's kind of a bit of both, because
I did not see that at all, Jack.
I'm going to get into it, but before I get into it, I think it's a really touching moment when they're saying goodbye, and then the camera zooms out, and it's just kind of, they're both small, standing on a bridge, and Link kind of turns to go and then pauses for like a split second before turning around and running away.
Yeah, no, that was a touching moment.
But, so, my general view of Ocarina of Time has changed a lot throughout the years, and I think now I kind of see it as a story about growing up, and I think that's why it resonates with a lot of people. It's like, I mean, it's almost explicitly a story about growing up with the time change mechanic.
Yeah.
True.
Yeah.
In that first hour or so, you have to go through these trials, and it's made very clear that this kid isn't like everyone else around him. And then he gets a fairy, which in the Kokiri culture is essentially like going through puberty, like you are now becoming a man kind of thing.
Yeah.
In fact, the very first barrier you encounter on the way to go see the Great Deku Tree is another Kokiri basically saying, you're not man enough to go see the Great Deku Tree.
Right.
Screw you, Maito. Screw you. And so you have to go get a sword and shield, and then he acknowledges you as a man because you have a fairy, a sword, and a shield. And so you head off to the Great Deku Tree, who's... like, you have to recognize that Link doesn't have a mother or a father in this game. So who's been taking care of him this entire time? I think it's basically the Great Deku Tree, who...
Right. That's what I thought.
Who was entrusted with him as a baby.
Right.
And if you think about it that way, okay, the Great Deku Tree is his father. Who has actually been taking care of him that entire time?
Well, Sari is the one that's always stood up for him and looked out for him, so yeah.
Yeah, like, I think essentially that Saria kind of raised him.
Well, I mean, she is a sage, so maybe she could travel back and forth through time too, so maybe she was both a mother figure and a love interest, depending on how old she was.
Well, yeah.
Who knows?
I mean, that's kind of it, because the Kokiri don't get older. So, I mean, she's essentially
that's true.
older lady, and so there's kind of that first crush kind of vibe going on, and she's also a caretaker, and then you have to leave. You have to leave the nest. You have to leave the forest, and she's the one who says goodbye to you. And then later on in the game, you go and find her again, and she teaches you a song that allows you to talk to her whenever you feel like it.
Right.
So it's kind of like you can phone home. There is a little bit of that sense.
Yeah, I guess so. I guess I always thought of her as kind of a sister / love interest.
Oh, that's better. Yeah.
Well, no, I mean, not that that's any better.
Game of Thrones has really had an effect on our culture, guys.
The sister thing, like, I don't know. Maybe it's just because she looks young.
Well, yeah, I think a lot of people...
That's probably got a lot to do with it.
We don't have to really dwell on that. You made a pretty good point, though.
Yeah, I think you explained it well.
Well, and so I think it kind of goes through that, and then the very first girl his age that Link meets is Talon from the Lon Lon Ranch.
Farm.
Yeah. And she kind of becomes a little bit of a love interest later on. But then the second lady...
I mean, really, all the ladies are love interests for Link.
Well, I mean...
He's the hero of time.
He's a player.
I think a lot of people say that, but there are actually a lot of characters in Ocarina of Time that a lot of people don't remember. Like, if you walk through the market square as a kid, like, there are tons of people in there, tons of NPCs.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there's the little couple that spins around all the time that are madly in love with each other, or there's the little girl chasing a chicken, or
the kids with the masks on,
the old lady with her dog. There's, the various shopkeepers, and the happy mask salesman is a really iconic one, and there's like another lady who's kind of fretting in a corner, and so there's like all these different.
And there's those zombies walking around.
Well, that's the sad part.
Later.
That's the sad part, because I'm pretty sure they all died.
Yeah.
Or at least the game heavily implies that they all became zombies. Because
at least in that version of time.
True.
They all died.
Which, do we want to get into that until later? Because
we don't necessarily need to.
No.
people often simplify it like, oh, Link just gets all the ladies, but I mean, he gets some of the ladies. Some of the ladies are interested in him. Others of them are not really. And I find those much more interesting. Like Zelda's mentor / bodyguard. She's awesome. She's one of my favorite characters in the Legend of Zelda series.
Impa? Is that it?
Yeah. Impa,
Right.
Impa, the lady who teaches her how to be chic.
Yeah.
Right.
Wait, Zelda the Sheik?
One of the greatest fake outs of all time since Samus was revealed to be a lady in the Metroid series.
Nintendo's good at that stuff. How about the Ocarina? I want to talk about the Ocarina.
What about the Ocarina?
It's the first time video games ever allowed me to make music and play
Oh, interesting.
music in a game, That's the first time I can remember that a game has ever incorporated music into the gameplay so fully. I thought that was fantastic. That's one of my favorite parts of that game is the Ocarina.
It was definitely not like the whistle from Link.
No, the whistle from Link to the Past it's nothing compared to it. So, yeah. We could talk about how we could talk about how Ocarina of Time is essentially, in a lot of ways, in my opinion, just a 3D Link to the Past, and how
you're wrong.
Link to the Past is a better game all around.
I mean, you're wrong.
Yeah, but we're not doing that. This is
yes, we're not doing that.
Maybe we could talk more about that when we talk about Link to the Past in a future episode.
I mean, we already talked about Link to the Past.
I was going to say, I thought you guys did that one.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, we did.
We can have an entire other episode about us arguing
we can do
about that.
We could do a just flat out Zelda episode at some point, but for now, in the interest of time, let's try to stay on topic.
Here's the thing: it is completely walking new ground. Anyone who simplifies Ocarina of Time as merely just a 3D version of what they did before is grossly oversimplifying the accomplishment and the huge differences between designing for a 2D world and a 3D world.
Yes. I will agree.
Yeah. Good.
Okay.
Grr.
Oh, yeah. I mean, Link to the Past dungeons are very vertical, even being top-down 2D. They're incredibly vertical. And so, that verticality was already there. So then when you have to add in the verticality of Ocarina of Time, at least you already have that template there. So, really the jump from Link to the Past to Ocarina of Time from 2D to 3D, you just take that map and you plop it down and you look at it from Link's point of view. And then you pioneer it's really not that different.
You pioneer how to make that all happen on a technological level in ways that no one's ever done before, and with whole systems that hadn't even been conceived before.
I thought we agreed not to discuss this at this point.
So Ocarina of Time. What about the ending of the game? What we all think of that?
Wait, I wanted to bring up something real quick. Just a small thing I saw online that not a whole lot of people talk about. Is there a small thread of kinda, sorta, little tiny bit of racism in Ocarina of Time?
Where's this?
Well, there are some people online. I was looking up stuff about Ocarina of Time, and a little blip of this came up where somebody was criticizing the game because they're pretty much the only black character is Ganondorf. And in particular, there's a line of dialogue like, "Oh, we know he's evil because of his evil eyes." And to the game's credit, Ganondorf does look like the evilest person you've ever seen in your life. Why would anyone trust him?
Yeah, I don't know why the king would ever have trusted him, but yeah.
Is there anything to that? What do you guys think?
No.
No.
Okay.
I think this game has an incredibly diverse group of people now. You can't really say they're this race, that race as it relates to the real world.
I think that's...
necessarily. But, yeah, I think that's just, again, like we were talking about before the show, people will come up with any kind of crazy theory, and there's going to be people that'll follow it.
I don't know, and maybe you'll disagree with me on this, Jack, but I think that's as ridiculous as calling Lord of the Rings racist.
I think it's fine to criticize Lord of the Rings for having a very white cast. Like I think that's a valid criticism. I don't think that makes it racist.
Yeah,
Right.
Yeah, I was going to say those are two separate things.
Right.
I mean, without intent, I don't really think it's racism.
I think it's kind of weird that in the Hobbit trilogy, they heard that criticism and their solution to it was like one black background character in one shot.
Which almost makes it worse.
Yeah.
Well, that's the movie.
Yeah. Anyway,
And The Hobbit was terrible.
That's off. I mean, that's also true. Except for the first one. The first Hobbit movie was okay.
It was okay. Yeah.
I don't really see any merit to that either. I think at worst it is kind of a little weird, but it's not something where I think there's any true malice, or it's not as weird to me as something like, say, The Witcher 3 having no black people in it.
Right. To me, it's a lot like Jeremy just said. Like, it's the definition of, like, exploration of other cultures. I mean, that's what that game is. You're exploring all these different cultures within that game world.
And to its credit, there are other races in the game. Just
well, you listed them all off earlier, and
well, yeah, but I mean, like,
they're each fascinating.
Even within kind of the Hylian race, there, you have basically people who are
Right.
Middle Eastern and like kind of Russian-esque people, and you have this wide variety of different backgrounds and stuff.
But it's also the way that the game celebrates the diversity in its cast of supporting.
That's true. One of my favorite moments in the game is when you bond with the Goron chieftain. And
Yeah.
you guys both just kind of have like a dance party. It's great.
Yeah, it's the best. So no, Ocarina of Time isn't racist.
I just thought that it was an interesting point to bring up. I think that part of why that question is brought up is because Ocarina of Time is it's such a cultural touchstone in the gaming community. And it's honestly so good. Like, I think there are very few things to criticize Ocarina of Time on. Aside from having aged a little bit, because it's obviously an N64 game and technologically not up to par with the games we have today.
No, but not expected to be.
Right.
Shouldn't be expected to be, I guess.
I honestly, there are very few games where I'm like, I would love to see this one-for-one remade with a more modern control scheme. But Ocarina of Time, like, if I had to choose one, it'd be probably Ocarina of Time. I would love to see that remade with modern graphics, all that stuff. And it kind of was for 3DS. But I want kind of a bigger budget version of that, which, I guess we kind of got with with Twilight Princess. But I want to see it one for one.
Yeah, you want this game because pacing. I mean, just from what I've played of Twilight Princess, the pacing in Ocarina is so much better. There's a better sense of like magic and mystery, and it's just. Doesn't compare.
Twilight Princess has its moments that are fantastic. Like, I think has one of the coolest moments of the series when Link and Ganon have a duel, like a sword fight duel at the end.
Yeah.
That is one of the most satisfying moments in the franchise's history.
It's like that Space World demo. Realized.
But yeah, I feel like we haven't even really scratched the surface. Like, for you two, what are your favorite moments from Ocarina of Time?
Yeah, probably just exploring the Hyrule Field for the first time, or just stepping out to Hyrule Field for the first time. But also, I think the Gorons, just in general, that whole
their whole society,
their whole dungeon and level and area was
in
great.
the first part, or when you're older.
Oh, the first part.
Okay. What about you, Jeremy?
Definitely the exploration. I thought that, me, I'm an explorer. I like that. I like the way Zelda games are set up in general, where, you get the long shots and the boomerang and the, different weapons and gadgets throughout the game, and then you can unlock areas that, you couldn't get to before. I always enjoy doing that. But just a lot of the side quests with some of the, not main characters, things you don't have to do, I guess, necessarily. Those always stick out in my mind.
Yeah.
Like just even racing Epona, the
horse.
Yeah. And getting the time that's under 50 seconds, gets you this like cow that you can milk or something like that and get, the moo moo milk or lon lon milk, whatever it's called. Just little stuff like that. I think it's pretty in depth when it comes to those things. The puzzle solving, I think, is fun. I always do think it's fun.
Yeah, for a game that has a lot of puzzles that revolve around pushing boxes, it's surprising how not irritating a lot of the puzzles are.
Yeah.
And of course the owl. Who doesn't love the owl?
Okay, I'm gonna
the owl.
say one thing about the owl that I think might be correct, and it's something that I realized while I was playing the other day.
The owl's not racist, Jack.
No, that's not it. But I think going with my whole interpretation of Ocarina of Time as kind of a coming of age story, I think the owl represents wisdom and the need to take your time in doing things to understand what's going on. And
absolutely.
And I say I say that because if you try and skip through his dialogue, for some reason, is the only dialogue in the game where if you continually try and skip it, you're gonna just repeat it nonstop.
Yeah.
You need to take the time to actually change your answer to, I understood that.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it defaults to no, I didn't understand that.
Watching Dylan play this game on the Wii, it frustrates me. Because all the dialogue, but in particularly the owl. He's just, I'm like, just stop.
That's kids, man.
Yeah, and then it's like, get into a dungeon, instead of fighting the enemies, he would just try to run right by them and get to the end. And I'm like, there's things, you're gonna need these things.
Well, did he play Dark Souls before he played Ocarina of Time? Okay.
No, he was pretty young when he played Ocarina. He's played Dark Souls.
Oh, he has? Okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just found that like a tiny mechanic that I feel kind of works as a thematic thing. Owls represent wisdom and having to take your time. I don't know. It seemed like an insight, a small one.
Yeah. Well, I think there's a lot of different moral and social messages in that game, and they're interesting to me. I don't know.
Yeah, my personal highlight from the game, I'm Re-Deads in particular, the zombie creatures. They freak me out. The scream they have is super weird and uncomfortable. But I think the most uncomfortable I am in Ocarina of Time are the wall masters, the giant shadow hands that come out and get you.
Yeah, those are freaky.
As a kid, those creeped me out so much, and I found it really almost cathartic when I fought Bongo Bongo, the giant ghost hand boss that bangs on a drum that knocks you up and down. I thought that fight was really interesting, and just I'm a sucker for dragons, and just the fight against Volgo. I'm probably pronouncing that name wrong, but
that's the one in the fire temple, right?
Yeah, it's a giant flying fire dragon.
Yeah.
Thought that was really, really fun and cool at the time. Not a huge fan of the final boss, like the final Ganon form.
Yeah, when he turns into Ganon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
but I am a fan of the damage that his cloak takes when you're doing the back and forth with his lightning balls at the end. I think that's really neat. Like, we could probably talk about this game for a long, long time.
We really could.
Probably could, but we can't.
Yeah,
I gotta be honest.
We really can't. We'll probably revisit it at some point.
Well, then I think we should. You mentioned doing a Versus episode at one point, and I think it would be good to still do that.
Yes.
But I think it kind of merits its own discussion as well.
Right. So I think... final thoughts from each of us. What do we think about this game?
Jeremy?
As usual, I didn't get to play it back in the day, so I don't have the nostalgia glasses to use. So I think for me, as a true gaming experience, having played it, 13 years after it came out, and still feeling like it was a game that could have came out that year for the first time, and I would have thoroughly enjoyed it. I feel that it's a game I want to revisit. I intend on revisiting it. I would like to play it in its quote-unquote natural state at some point, if I ever get it for the 64. I do have a 64 in the basement. I just never plugged it in.
There you go.
Yeah. I personally think it's a great game. It's probably in my top 5 of all time. It's in a lot of people's top 1, 2 of all time. I think it still currently has the highest score on Metacritic ever.
I do think it's really interesting that if you look at a lot of the official scores from when it released, it's perfect scores almost all the way across the board, but I find it really fascinating that Nintendo Power gave it a 9.5.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's funny.
Which to me is kind of incredible.
Yeah, because they gave everything like an 8 and above. It was, just an aside about Nintendo Power, it was it was eye-opening when, and mind-blowing when I first started reading other gaming magazines. And I mean, like, EGM and GamePro and like Game Informer, specifically EGM and Game Informer, because GamePro itself was pretty easy in their reviews. But like all of a sudden, all these games that I thought were like just masterpieces from what I had heard about them, at least. Like I read other reviews from other publications, and it's like, oh, well, so it wasn't perfect. But not specifically Ocarina of Time. Everybody thought Ocarina of Time was perfect. Right. Exactly. Nintendo Power was propaganda for Nintendo. And as a kid, I did not necessarily realize that until I started reading other magazines.
It's like the North Korean news stations.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, I've kind of made my opinion clear on Ocarina. I think I'm harsher on this game than I should be because I just resent it for the water temple. I would really like to play it on 3DS, or at least I think the Wii U version does the same thing. Like it has the same improvements. So something like that. But you can't deny just how great that game was. And I was hyping that game up so much before it came out. Like Nintendo Power specifically had a Zelda issue that was like golden. It was like a gold issue, and it had 100 screenshots for Ocarina of Time. And this was probably like a year before the game came out. And it was right around the time the N64 launched. And I remember just pouring through that and analyzing every screenshot and being just blown away by some of those screenshots. Like, they had shots of specifically like his room in the village in the tree, and the town square because those were pre-rendered, and being an N64 kid, there weren't many pre-rendered games on N64. It wasn't like the PlayStation with Resident Evil and Parasite Eve and all these other games that had pre-rendered backgrounds.
Yeah.
Like N64, I didn't see that very often, and I hadn't played Myst, and so games like that, like the graphics like that, just blew me away. I was like, "What the heck is this? This looks incredible." But then you go and play the game, and it doesn't all look like that. But man, it still looked really great. And like you said, the animations were so fluid. Nintendo was very good with that. They pioneered Z targeting, which is not doesn't go by that name anymore, but a lot of games use that, and they don't use it. Yeah, it's lock-on targeting now. It's ubiquitous, and it's crazy how influential that game has been over the last, almost 20 years. It's amazing.
Well,
it's a great
game.
game.
Even Z targeting, lock-on targeting, if you're going to design a game for the N64, it's a brilliant way to overcome the inability to control a camera without a second joystick.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like how else are you going to do it, really? Like how are you going to do it well?
Right.
While also maintaining all the other functionality you need to have for a game like Zelda. Some people might say, "Oh, you could put it to the C buttons, the yellow buttons on the controller."
GoldenEye did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's actually early builds of the game that the camera was on the C buttons, but they scrapped that so they could use those for items instead.
Exactly.
Right.
And
which was so smart.
It really was. I think it's interesting because we're recording this just a few days after the 20th anniversary of the N64. Yeah. And I played it just a couple days ago. And it's still fun for me, at least. I don't know how fun it'll be for my nephews, but I mean, I had them play it once and they've asked me a few times now if they can come and play it again.
Yeah.
So it still evokes that sense of wonder, even though it's using technology that's 20 years old at this point. And I think that's kind of beautiful in a way, that it can still speak to kids even in a generation of where graphics have gone so far beyond where they were 10 years or 20 years ago. I mean, for crying out loud, it was on 32 megabytes.
Yep.
We have games that are 50 times that size now.
Yeah, at least 50 times that size. Yeah, 500 times that size.
I mean, it's incredible that it can still speak to us that way, even though it's like the game Passage that we talked about a while back on this show. That's 1 megabyte.
Yeah.
And it's a 5-minute long game that is a very artistic experience, but they managed to fit an entire game world, an open game world, into a game that's only 32 times bigger than a 5-minute experience.
Yeah.
Which is pretty freaking incredible.
It is.
The hardest thing for me going into this episode was trying to think of things that to knock Ocarina of Time on. What do you guys think it doesn't do well?
The water temple. That's it.
I mean, I don't even think the water temple is that bad.
I know, that's my opinion.
The mid-boss fight in the water temple is one of the most iconic boss fights of all time. And it's a mid-boss.
Sure.
Where you fight Dark Link.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And
I also don't think that's a very fun boss fight, but all right.
But
I love that.
You have to admit, it's a really interesting fight. You walk into a room that's just all reflections.
Yeah, it is. It definitely.
I would love.
It is.
I would love to, if Ocarina of Time had a developer commentary, I would love to hear how they did that room, because
really just every game needs to have a developer commentary. Every game.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've been replaying Firewatch occasionally and listening to the developer commentary that they patched in. It's fantastic.
Yeah.
Anyway.
You know the guy who makes Five Nights at Freddy's? Or just, you've heard of the Five Nights at Freddy's franchise?
Yes.
Yeah.
It's on its 6th game now. The guy's a solo developer, and for Five Nights at Freddy's sister location, he's releasing a developer commentary and like developer extras so that people can have insight into how he makes those games. And if one guy can solo do that, come on, guys.
Right?
Come on, video game industry. Yeah, we want to hear these stories.
Teams of hundreds of people.
I mean, if we can make this podcast every week, they can do that.
Yeah. So, Jack, I also thought about criticisms before the show, and I really couldn't come up with any that were legit. I honestly couldn't.
I mean, I think that there are a lot of things you could nitpick about the game.
Yes.
Obviously.
Like, when it came out, again, a lot of people nitpicked on the graphical capabilities of it, which, looking back on it today, they were basically comparing apples and oranges in terms of technological achievements for things. Mm-hmm. And I also saw that there were some nitpicks about sound, how the sound wasn't as great as other comparable titles. It's ironic to me that they were complaining about the sound because the Ocarina of Time soundtrack has now become one of the most iconic soundtracks of all time.
It's a fantastic soundtrack.
Actually really enjoyed the sound in that game, but maybe that's just me.
In fact, there's a touring symphonic orchestra.
Yeah, I was going to say, a very successful one.
That highlights a lot of songs from Ocarina of Time.
And not just the songs, the sounds, too. I mean, the chest openings and all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. The rupee dings.
One of the slight criticisms I saw of Ocarina of Time is that there are a lot of moments where it makes you wait for things. Like, when you open a chest, there has to be a whole cutscene in order for you to get the thing. And at first it's cool, and then that novelty kind of wears off. Or sometimes you're opening a door and it has to be a cutscene. And I think a lot of
those load screens.
Yeah, aren't they kind of hiding loading times behind that stuff, though?
I think they're hiding loading times behind the doors. I'm not so sure about the chests. But, I mean, that is such a small nitpick. It also included waiting for puzzles and how time-based mechanics for puzzles aren't necessarily fun because waiting isn't fun. And I can see the validity of that criticism, but I also, it's not that big of a deal to me if I have to wait.
Yeah, to me personally,
3 more
it doesn't
seconds.
bother me, but I can understand where it might some.
It's not like the puzzles in that sense aren't as tight as something like Portal,
right?
Yeah,
but it's an action. It's a game that tries to do action, adventure, RPG things. Like, it's doing almost everything that a game in 1998 could do, and it's doing them all pretty well, and that I feel kind of adds up to generally 2 thumbs up.
Yeah, in an open world also. I mean, I think that's, was pretty challenging at that time.
And
what pull that off.
And it's not that big of an open world, but it feels so big.
It feels big because, Hyrule's the hub, and yes, it's not completely open. You do have to, you go into other areas, and there's you do have to transition, obviously.
Yeah.
But, it's got a big open hub in the Hyrule Fields where you can get to pretty much anywhere from.
And we haven't even touched on this part, but there's a day-night cycle, too.
Yeah.
Which is
great.
Super interesting. And I love that when I went back and played it, I noticed that unless you are, maximizing your movement time by rolling constantly, there's no way you can get from the Kokiri village to the Hyrule Gate before nightfall.
Mm-hmm.
Without, you basically have to go through one night while you're traversing Hyrule Field, which means you have to spend the night outside the city walls dealing with these undead zombies that are coming up.
Yeah.
Which that's just a small, really neat piece of game.
Skeletons.
Yeah.
Jack. Skeletons.
They're zombies. they're dead people. What you have to ask is why there are so many skeletons on the ground. Obviously something really terrible happened in Hyrule Field at some point.
At some point.
Battle.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's a lot of things that went down there, so it's possible.
There's a lot of darkness lurking in the edges of Ocarina of Time, and I really like that. I appreciate it.
I love it.
It's kind of like one of those really great 80s kids movies that has that isn't afraid to go into kind of dark territory.
Majora's Mask is more like that, but yeah, totally.
Oh yeah, Majora's Mask cranks everything up to 11, I think.
Yeah, it's like almost creepy.
Yeah.
Like spooky.
Yeah.
Oh, that moon.
So are we ready to call this?
I'm ready, yeah. I assume everybody would say it's the best games period.
Oh, hands down for me it is, yes.
I mean, I find it hard to imagine anyone arguing that it isn't. I can see someone arguing that they don't find it as fun as everyone else seems to, or they think it's overrated. But I think if you look at the influence it had across the industry, like, you have to come down on yes. Like,
yeah.
Ocarina of Time became the standard action-adventure games were compared to until Uncharted. And even then, Uncharted is different in a lot of ways, where they can both different. Exist side by side.
I would say Dark Souls.
Well, I think Dark Souls is a direct spiritual successor. I'm talking more about action-adventure in a more...
Oh, you mean like a
broad
fictional genre sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think Uncharted proved that there could be a different kind of action-adventure game.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Yeah, in some ways, yeah, totally.
So, Jack, are you saying yes?
Oh, yeah. Okay. I'm saying I don't understand how anyone could come down on a no.
Yeah, I mean, I'll put.
I just wanted to hear that yes for certain.
I'll put the poll out there. I didn't do a poll, just if anybody's wondering, we did not do a poll for You Must Build a Boat, because I don't think we'll do polls for honorable mentions. But
that was an inspired choice, by the way, Jeremy.
Yeah, that was
what about the game? What did we do the week before that?
Okami.
Did we do a poll for that?
Oh, we did. Yeah, actually, overwhelmingly, Okami was voted a best game period by folks. Yeah.
It's interesting because I think if we did a versus episode between Ocarina of Time and Okami, hands down, I would do Ocarina of Time.
Well, I most likely would as well, but
yeah, I think I would.
We would also start wars on things on the social media sites. People would lose friends.
I think
on the cyber.
Yes.
But I can't imagine very many people voting no for Ocarina of Time. But maybe, I mean, we'll put the poll out there and see what people say.
There'll be one or two. There's always going to be.
There'll be some, yeah.
Yeah. Cool. So
all right.
It's unanimous.
It is.
Huzzah!
Not a shocker.
Harmonious agreement.
Just props to Nintendo and Miyamoto and Aonuma. Those guys know what they're doing.
Yeah. Fun fact, Miyamoto wanted Link to be in a first-person perspective in this game.
Yeah.
That would have been rough.
That would have been not good. They really set the standard for how to create 3D games with their games on the N64.
Can I say something that might be a little bit controversial?
No.
Well, too bad. I'm going to say it anyway. I think it's a real shame that Miyamoto kind of got out of designing games.
Yes, I agree.
I think that's a waste of his talents. Like,
yep.
Even his last original creation, Pikmin,
mm-hmm.
even though it's not, like, that great in terms of everything else he's made, it's still really fantastic.
It's still great.
Yeah. He's highly successful, obviously, and he deserves to go up and make more money and have better titles, but that doesn't mean he still can't design some games. Come on.
I would really like him to just go to whoever's in charge now. Who's in charge now that
I don't know the name off the top of my head.
But I just want him to go to them and be like, look, I'm going to sequester myself in a room for a year and bang out a prototype for
whatever I want.
Some 8-bit style just game that I always wanted to do on the NES or the Super NES and never really was able to do because we moved on to the N64. Like I just want him to be like, I had this concept because you know he had some ideas that never fully produced. Right?
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
absolutely. I want him to just seclude himself for however long he needs to make that.
He should do the Luke Skywalker thing.
I think what we're seeing with Miyamoto is one of the biggest cultural differences between the United States, or even just the Western world, and how we do business over here, and how Japan does business. I think if Miyamoto were working at a Western developer, they would basically just, at this point, just give him free reign to develop whatever he wants.
Yeah.
But I think because he works at a Japanese developer in a very traditionally Japanese company, that means he succeeded early in his career, so that means he's bumped up to more oversight positions and has less hands-on time. I don't know even if he would want to... do you think he still has the desire to get down in the trenches and make stuff?
Probably, to a degree.
Or is he fine kind of...
I don't think you ever lose that.
I mean, he's always smiling, so I think he's happy with what he's doing. But no, I was being sincere.
Yeah.
I've heard stories about him
content.
losing his temper on people, though, and I've heard that he can be pretty vicious if he...
I bet he's kind of like Steve Jobs.
And maybe he does get down in the trenches, and we just don't hear about it.
Yeah.
I mean,
but like with Iwata, we there were a lot of stories about how he got down in the trenches and like rolled up his sleeves and got to coding.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Yeah.
I wonder if we'll hear similar stories about Miyamoto.
Maybe,
but
we don't know.
I just wish he was given.
I mean, I hope he doesn't have to die before we hear those stories.
Not what I meant. I just wish things were a little bit different, and he kind of went the Kojima route where he just got carte blanche to do whatever.
Yeah.
Not to be morbid or disrespectful to anybody else in the industry, but the day that Miyamoto...
That sentence always ends well.
The day that Miyamoto does die is going to be one of the saddest games in this industry has ever seen.
Oh, for sure.
The saddest days. Sorry, I said game.
I knew what you meant. Without a doubt.
All right, we got to wrap up. Jeremy, thank you for joining me tonight.
Daniel.
Jeremy.
Jack.
Daniel.
Jack.
Jeremy.
Jack.
Daniel.
Jack.
Thank you for joining me tonight as well, Jack. And thank you, good listeners, for joining us for episode 40 of The Best Games Period. Jack, before I close this out, can you tell us all about Extra Life?
I would be happy to, Daniel.
Especially since it's coming up.
It's
long from now.
We're in like the last 30 days leading up to Extra Life, so you really should get on it and check it out. Basically, Extra Life is like doing a charity walkathon or something, except instead of walking around, you're playing games. It's 24 hours of playing video games on November 5th, or you could play board games or tabletop or pen and paper or really any kind of game you want for 24 hours or however long your schedule allows. And when you sign up at extra-life.org, you have the opportunity to choose which Children's Miracle Hospital you want to support. So you know where that money is going, and guess what? 100% of that money is going to that hospital. So that means any money you get pledged to you by friends, family, or strangers even, you know where it's going, and all of it is going to the Children's Hospital to pay for treatment for kids. You know, we understand that not everyone has the time or energy to power through with, fundraising. But you know what else? It helps if you just spread the word about what Extra Life is. You know, share the link on your Facebook or on your Twitter, or see if you have friends who are interested in signing up. Get them to sign up, and then support their fundraising efforts. Honestly, it's very grassroots, so however much you want to put into it is however much you're going to get out of it. And it's really, really awesome. This year, we're hoping to break $10 million raised for kids all across North America. So check it out at extra-life.org. You can find out a lot more information there. You can sign up. If you want to check out kind of the more community-oriented part of the site, you can go over to community.extra-life.org. And you can find this podcast there, or you can interact with the various local Extra Life guilds that are spread across all over Canada and the United States and connect with local people who participate in Extra Life and have a blast doing it and helping kids in their communities.
And now, Jack, Extra Life is on November 5th, correct?
Correct.
But does that mean that you have to raise the money by November 5th and that's the cutoff point?
Actually, no. Basically, all you have to do, there's some flexibility. We actually accept donations all the way up until the end of December. So whatever time or day fits into your schedule can be the day that you do your marathon.
So you can do your marathon anytime, really.
Right.
It doesn't even have to be on November 5th. And
if it's grandma's birthday on November 5th, if it's mom's birthday, dad's birthday or something, you can go out and celebrate that and do your marathon on November 6th or 12th or whenever actually works for you.
Yeah, you could do it on Thanksgiving because you just don't want to interact with family.
Or we've even had people in the past break up their marathon into like 3-hour chunks and spread it out over a week. Or we've also had people go, no, 24 hours, piece of cake. I'm going to take it to the next level and get 3 other people and we're going to relay. We're going to live stream and relay that live stream and we're going to go for an entire week straight. So however far you want to take it, with whatever games you want to do it with. One of our large sponsors is Wizards of the Coast, and so we have people who play in Magic the Gathering. We have people playing Dungeons and Dragons. People who do condensed 24-hour long one-shot campaigns. So honestly, your imagination is the limit. So head over to extra-life.org and check it out. All
right. And as Jack said, every Monday this show goes up on community.extra-life.org as well as on Game Informer, and we put it out on Twitter and Facebook. You can follow us on Twitter at Best Games Period. You can find the show on iTunes under The Best Games Period. You can also find it on Libsyn, which is our hosting site. Every once in a while, we put an episode up on YouTube as well, and I believe this episode will be on YouTube. So if you want to see a video version of it, check that out as well. And we also put it up on SoundCloud every Monday. For the most part, I don't think we've missed a Monday, have we?
We've missed one Monday over the past year.
That's really actually great.
And you know what? It was entirely my fault because I was recording an honorable mention of Skies of Arcadia and my computer pooped out and it disappeared. So
oh right, that was the one.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah.
Otherwise we at least have something for you every Monday, even if it isn't a fully fledged episode. So
yep. But this was definitely a full-fledged episode. So if you enjoy the Best Games Period, please leave us a review on iTunes. Even if you don't enjoy us, leave a review on iTunes. The more reviews we can get on iTunes, the better. It doesn't even matter if it's a 1-star review or a 5-star review. We just would like some more reviews.
I would rather you didn't give us a 1-star review. But if you feel that that's how bad our show is, let us know. We want to get better.
We want to get better, so we can always get better. We'll be back next week, as usual, with another game. I'm gonna leave it a mystery for now. But let us know in the comments, wherever you find us, what you think of Ocarina of Time. What are your memories of it? When did you play it in life? Do you think it's one of the best games, period? If not, what is wrong with you?
No, I legitimately want people to tell us why they would think it's not. I would find that reasoning fascinating. I don't even want to get into an internet argument, a stupid internet argument. I just want to know the reasoning behind that.
Yeah, no, we won't argue with you. We just want to know why you don't think so. And if you do think it is, like we do, let us know that as well. That's it. I'm done with the spiel. Y'all have a very nice week. And we'll see you on the flippity dippity.
Dang it.